Sorry, I guess I thought I was recording. I was not recording. I think we're recording. I see us recording. Hopefully we're recording. If not, I'm not going to keep doing this over and over. Anyway, I just want to give my 2 cents about the Ebony Davis or Williams, what she said about. Let's just insert her clip. Let's hear what she said.
Reality is that our marriage and partnership market value is depreciating with every passing year. No matter how good we look, no matter how fit we are, men are still seeing primarily our presumed dwindling fertility as a knock against us. So here's my advice. If you are a young Black woman in college and you know in your heart and in your head that you want to prioritize family, I suggest that you simultaneously pursue that MRS degree right along with that BA or JD. Because the handful of Black college-age men that actually do desire to get married soon, and they do share that value system, and family is a priority for them too, y'all, that is an incredibly small pool, and it's shrinking as you get older. And by the time you reach my age, 40, you will be faced with different choices relating to life partnership and motherhood.
Basically, Ebony Williams is talking about a concept that is well defined and is well practiced by civil society. So, this concept is known as assortative mating.
Okay, so assortative mating, what is it? It's a scientific term that means selective breeding or mating. It's a form of non-random mating where people choose mates based on their observable characteristics. For example, people may choose mates based on religious, cultural, or ethnic preferences, professional interests, physical traits, educational attainment, or financial means.
I've made other videos about assortative mating. I will put those videos in the description box. Basically, assortative mating is this concept that it's sort of like Darwinism, like survival of the fittest. The most fit people in society shall rise to the top and shall like procreate together and then create like the next generation of superior humans. Like that is kind of the point here, which is why a lot of people value things like intellect and technology because as you know, like human civilization has grown now and we've been able to utilize like information to develop like tools, infrastructure, and technology to live better, live more efficiently, right? Like we have glassware, we have used grapes to make wine.
I'm not going to say too much about Gattaca and the bell curve here. Maybe I'll insert a very small clip from the bell curve just because I think it's useful to hear what I'm talking about. But the bell curve is basically a book that this guy Charles Murray wrote that basically talked about like why intellectualism is prospering in the 21st century and how people who are smart, basically like their IQ, which is like an intelligence test, if it's above a certain amount, they're going to do fairly well in society. And he he wrote the book a while ago. And so he revisited it. Like it's been trotting around a lot of conservative circles. I don't really hear very many Black people talk about it, but I think because they don't know what it is, because I'm not going to say everybody, but there's a large amount of Black Americans with very low IQ. It's not everybody, but yeah, so they don't really talk about this. I feel like I would probably have to agree, just given things that I've seen in society, especially like with the propagation of like music now, and just having the ability for other people to express themselves, and then viewing the way that they actually choose to do it. It's just like, wow, I feel like there are some people seriously like operating on a lower vibrational state, and that's just
so the bell curve itself, over 900 pages. I don't know how many charts and tables. It was very data intensive. I think there were over 100 pages of footnotes, many of those footnotes being small essays in themselves, several appendixes, and it sold 330,000 copies in hardback, which is a strange combination of things. The book itself, when Dick and I set out on it, and while we were working on it, we wanted to make it a moderate book. We wanted to make it moderate in tone, unhysterical, no headline-catching phrases. We wanted its science to be very moderate. Dick had a saying that he did not like to ask the data to give up more than it gladly would give. And so I would argue that we pulled a lot of punches in that book in terms of what we said and how we said it. The book is divided into four main parts. The first part, and let me just bring this up because I need some reminding myself about how this works. The first part was the emergence of a cognitive elite. If any of you have read Coming Apart, the first couple of chapters are lifted almost verbatim from the bell curve. There are long chunks of text in there which really are close to verbatim. And that's the nice thing of having written a book like The Bell Curve, which got so much commentary, but so few people read it, that I could get away with recycling this material. But the emergence of the cognitive elite talked about the same issues that were in Coming Apart, about cognitive partitioning that was going on in the United States, driven by a couple of phenomena. One was that the college sorting machine kicked into high gear during the 1950s, so that, here's my favorite illustration. The Harvard incoming freshman class in 1952 had mean SAT verbals of, I think, about 578. In 1960, the incoming Harvard freshman class had mean SAT verbals in the high 600s. It had gone up over about a standard deviation over the course of 8 years. It was a conscious decision on the part of Harvard. Dean Bender wrote about the notion Harvard was going to be a place for the most talented as opposed to the socially most prominent. But the same thing was going on throughout the university system, all the way down. So cognitive sorting got into high gear then, not the 1960s, the 1950s. And that was one of the forces. You had a lot more intellectual talent being identified, sent off to the best schools. At the same time, something else was going on in the economy, and that is brains were becoming worth a lot more in the marketplace. And we went through the same kind of data that Robert Reich went through in Work of Nations, which came out a few years earlier, the same kind of data that everybody talks about now, which only accelerated after the 1950s, as being smart simply had greater market value for a variety of reasons that most of you in this room already know. You take those two things together, and you have a lot of people who were becoming affluent, who in the old days couldn't become affluent. For example, those people who had very high math ability, but no interpersonal skills, who in 1920 could be actuaries, and by the 1970s, 80s, and 90s could command very large salaries from Silicon Valley, and could command even larger promises of money from the quant hedge funds in New York City and the surrounding suburbs. So we talked about that, and talked in addition to the way that was contributing to a layer cake in America. That's the reason for the subtitle of The Bell Curve, which is Intelligence and Class Structure in American Life. We then turn in part 2 to cognitive classes and social behavior. And here we wanted to establish the relationship of IQ to a wide variety of socioeconomic outcomes. We had chapters on poverty and on schooling and on unemployment, family structure, welfare dependency, parenting styles, and crime. We also had one on civility and citizenship. This is the place where we did a lot of regression analysis, but we wanted to keep it straightforward. We did not want to toss 12 different independent variables into the mix. We wanted something that a general lay audience could follow. So we had a measure, we had a socioeconomic status index, comprised as they all are of income, education, and occupation, a combination thereof. And we had the score on the AFQT, a highly G-loaded test from the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth. And we also did the kind of thing that I am very proud of, but attracted a lot of technical criticism. One of the big problems in trying to assess the relationship of IQ to socioeconomic outcomes is, how do you treat education? Do you just throw education in as one more independent variable when you know there's such an interaction between education and IQ? To us, are there really sophisticated techniques that can disentangle, to some degree, that problem? Yeah, there are, but they are also quite complex. So what Dick and I did was we had sub-analyses that consisted of homogeneous educational samples, a sample of people who had exactly 12 years of education, high school diploma, no more, no less, and another subsample that had exactly 16 years of college, no more, no less. And then we demonstrated that for those groups independently, there was an important independent effect of IQ. Seems to me a very elegant way, actually, to deal with the education problem, and we were criticized by many eminent econometricians and sociologists for being too simple-minded in the way we dealt with it. That was quite irritating to me. Then we moved from that part of the discussion to the national context, because in all of those chapters about socioeconomic outcomes, we'd done one other thing. We had limited the sample to non-Latino whites. Again, which seemed to us to be a really smart thing to do. He said, forget about all the complications of race. Here is the independent effect of IQ on these outcomes for a non-Latino white population. So the next part of the book was to say, can you generalize to the rest of the population? Dick and I, at one point during the writing, considered not discussing race at all. It just was the elephant in the corner. There's no way you could do that whole book and not confront race. And so this part of the book had to assess the question, do IQ scores measure the same thing in blacks and other ethnic racial subgroups as they measure in whites? And there's a very large technical literature on that. The technical literature is quite clear. Yeah, it does measure the same thing. It's not cultural bias that explains the difference in test scores. The predictiveness of the tests is equal for, well, let me rephrase that. The predictive validity of the test is not equal, but insofar as there is a difference, it is that IQ tests tend to overpredict black performance rather than underpredict it. Whereas if the tests were biased against blacks, it would be the other way around. So it was an issue that we had to tackle. So chapter 13, that was an accident of numbering that I wasn't too happy about. Chapter 13 took on ethnic differences on IQ. Dick and I were smart enough to put in the opening paragraphs of that chapter, to those of you who have turned first to this chapter, because we were sure that we knew that race and IQ was going to get a lot of attention.
We have microphones and thermals, okay? We have like sandals for our feet, and we have clippers for our nails, and we can get I can use hair clips and make cool hairstyles, and then all of these things, right? We have YouTube and social media. So as society has developed and gone forward, now we need to think about how we can live better and more efficiently. This is why we have things like baby formula. That is actually a technology. Otherwise, you'd have to use breast milk. But baby formula is actually pretty cheap. You can get a Costco brand of baby formula, and for I don't know, $3,000 have enough to literally feed your baby until they don't need baby formula anymore. That is literally advanced technology. Every person, every mother in the world does not have access to Costco or Walmart brand baby formula to feed their baby. That's not a thing. This is why we are a part of the developed world. And so assortative mating is this idea that kind of like the precursors that enable you to get into more exclusive spaces are doing the hard labor of weeding out undesirable people, so that hopefully you will be around more desirable people and then mate and procreate with them to aim for a better society. That's kind of the big idea. Now, white women have been doing this for a while. There's a lot of books written about it. There's a book I love to refer people to. It's called Marriage Markets. This book, I will just maybe, put a little slide in here about marriage.
Yeah, this is the book Marriage Markets. It's available on Audible. I'll put a link in the description box.
you should go read that book. It's a really great book. If you aren't familiar with these concepts, it's an audio book now, but it really just feels like the Black community for some reason is talking about these themes, okay, and like societal instances that like everyone knows about. Why do you think when people are like dating other people, they ask about their background? Oh, where did they go to school? Oh, who are their parents? Where did their parents go to school? What do their parents do? How were they raised? You know, what is your zip code? All of those are like social cues that could tell you something about culture. Now, an interesting thing about that for Black Americans specifically, or even continental Africans, is that a lot of people are not familiar with what our culture is. Some people are. Like, I feel like to some extent, Beyonce has done a really good job of documenting a lot of parts of Black history and making it consumable for other people who are not a part of Black culture, and actually introducing it into American media in general with things like the Black Band. There was that film that Nick Cannon did, Drumline. Really all the things that were Lemonade. There was so much in that little documentary film that was just seeped in like Black American culture, which does have quite a lot to do with slavery. But I feel like if you are not a historian, you might have missed all of those social cues. That's fine. It's fine. You know, it's not my prerogative to introduce you to those things. You can go look them up for yourselves. A lot of people have done work to unpack those things. The point is, though, there's another film about this, and I unpacked this like 3 years ago, I'm going to say. It's called Mona Lisa Smile. I think I've made 3 videos about Mona Lisa Smile, which is a movie starring Julia Roberts, where she is a female instructor at this very small liberal arts college, where most of the women who go to this small liberal arts college, even though they're getting an undergraduate degree, they're just there to marry and become housewives. Like, that is usually the next step. For some reason, though, in the Black community, this isn't happening. And there's just a number of reasons for that. Like I said, the Black people in general are just a very small percentage of this population. That doesn't mean that Black people are a small percentage of planet Earth, because they're not. We're just talking about American society. But like, if we're being clear here, like Orthodox, conservative American society is on a literal like timeline. And there are just like lots of rules and social cues and how do you say, like status reports. It is on a timeline, okay? It's kind of like you do this, you do this, you do this, and then this happens, and it just keeps going. And like that is how it works. In the same way that like rent, your bills are due every month, or due at a certain period of time. There are consequences if you don't pay them. There's like law and order in this society. That isn't true for every society on Earth, and I think that's the reason that we talk about the developed world. We could also talk for a minute about, I want to insert something that Matt Walsh said that I thought is just worth repeating.
This week, and while the wonks avoided the topic, the rise of single-parent households in America exacerbated inequality and contributed to astonishingly high rates of child poverty. Now, this part is all true, of course, but there's much more to say. In fact, this is the whole story right here. It would at least make for a more interesting article in The Atlantic, I would think. Everyone knows it's better for kids to be raised by 2 parents than by 1. You know, that's how things are naturally set up. Every child has 2 biological parents. No child has ever had 1 or 3, only 2, which is a pretty good indication that they are supposed to be raised by 2. And those 2, just to be clear, are a man and a woman. This is the most natural thing. Or I should say, it's nature in its elevated, civilized state. Now, in the animal kingdom, in most cases, babies are conceived. The father runs off after copulation, and the babies are born, and they're raised only by their mothers, and usually only for a short time before they're out on their own. So single parenthood becoming more common and accepted in human society is a sign that society is devolving. People are behaving more like cats and crocodiles than human beings. Single parenthood it's literally animalistic. It's what you find in the animal kingdom. It's a family arrangement that you can find in the forest or in the jungle or out on the Serengeti. It's not meant for human society. We are not beasts. We are people. And we're supposed to raise our children, both parents, father and mother. Now, obviously, we're speaking here on the broad societal level. Society devolves and it becomes more animalistic. when it accepts and promotes single parenthood as a positive good, as equal to the nuclear family, or even better than it. Now, that isn't to say that obviously every single parent themselves has done something wrong necessarily. If a child is raised by one parent because the other parent died, for example, then that's a situation where you have no choice but to make do, and those parents deserve a lot of credit and a lot of respect. The same for a situation where a child is raised by one parent because the other abandoned the family. The one who is left is now the one who left the family and abandoned the family is acting like an animal. The one who is left is doing the best they can to compensate. The trouble is that many kids are being raised in single-parent households because both parents are irresponsible and selfish.
So what Matt Walsh was actually getting at there is that, like, a part of being in the developed world is men, like, not just, like, leaving their children by the river. Which I don't think that black men know this yet, but that's why people keep calling them primates and saying, like, you're not developed, and they consider them monkeys, and all these, like, anthropologists and social anthropologists have been making these, like, very deep connections between, like, animal society and black men because they keep leaving their families. Like, women and children are just weaker. So you can only really base the society on the men. Okay, now, Ebony Williams talking about, like, fertility rates and marriage, there's nothing you could really do. This is a very strange thing to say, but I gotta be serious about this. There's nothing you could really do as a woman that would, like, she's talking as though there was something that she could have done to improve her odds of being married or something, or trying to improve the odds of other black women being married. I don't think that that's a thing. First of all, like I continue to say this, black people are only 13% of this population, and that number is going down. Even the black Americans who are here now are being actually replaced with continental Africans. You can go look into the data here for yourself. So yes, there are black bodies, but no, they're not actual black American people. Like, the men who are here today are not the men who are going to be here tomorrow. The women, on the other hand, will be. And so women have some choices to make about who they want to be in society. This is just a thing that is happening. Women are going to be here, but I don't think our men will be. So you got to move forward. Hold on, I think this is dying, so let's figure out what's happening.